Jack Nicholson. No one wanted to resist. The newspapers wrote about him. Jack can toss any of his lovers out the door the next morning like a worn-out toy. The most astonishing thing is that none of them ever thought the price of his love was too high. Anjelica Huston was famous all over Hollywood for her strange habit of making lists for every occasion. She had detailed inventories of lost, found, and purchased things, of gifts, of friends and enemies, of kisses, and even handshakes. One evening, returning from a party with her friend Shirley, the latter suggested Anjelica start a new list, a list of men she had conquered, and put Jack Nicholson at the very top. After The Raven, Easy Rider, and 5 Easy Pieces, he had already earned the title of a cool star and was the center of attention at every party. "Who cares if he's married?" Shirley said. "That just means he has experience." People fall into 2 categories: those who marry and those who don't. I belong to the second, but Nicholson is clearly in the first. Men like that are easier to deal with. And did you notice the way he was looking at you? Anjelica was 14 years younger than Nicholson. Her father, John Huston, a well-known film director, had started his career back in the late 1920s. He was either away on set or in the arms of some new mistress. Her mother died in a car crash when Anjelica was still a child. From an early age, rumors followed her that the accident wasn't an accident at all, that the collision had been staged. One way or another, her idea of family life was far from ideal. When she first met Jack, the very first thing she asked him was whether he collected anything. "Women," Nicholson replied, giving her a slow look from head to toe, clearly calculating what place she might take in his collection. "How funny," said Anjelica. "I collect only men's promises. Maybe that's why I'm still not married, even though I'm already 21. Nicholson wasted no time. He moved closer, and after their very first kiss, he asked, "Don't tell me you've never had a boyfriend before me?" Anjelica closed her eyes and shook her head. She was happy and ready for anything. Jack smiled like a cat that had just caught a fat mouse. That evening, Anjelica had every right to begin her new list of conquests. At the very top stood Nicholson. He was her first, and so far, her only. But she assured herself that he wouldn't stay alone there for long. Still, Jack intended to top another of her lists, that of common-law husbands. Very soon, he asked Anjelica to move in with him. She turned to her father for advice, a man who knew Hollywood better than anyone. John Huston told her what, 20 years later, would be written in countless newspapers and magazines. If you ask who is the most amorous actor in Hollywood, who makes women lose their heads, the answer will always be Jack Nicholson. Anjelica even recorded those words in her diary. Among the stars, Big Jack, as he liked to call himself, was the record holder for breaking women's hearts. Had he lived in Casanova's time, the great Italian lover would have been completely overshadowed. After all, Nicholson's list included not just countless unknown beauties, but also first-class stars like Jessica Lange, Meryl Streep, and Madonna. Jack used to say, "Yes, you can't love every woman, but you should at least try." Whenever he looked at a woman, she immediately knew. He wanted to try. The rest was up to her. Her father explained that women went crazy for Jack, mostly because of his gaze. Every woman thought he looked at her as if she were the only one, and that made her start planning a wedding. But Jack didn't care. If marrying her was the only way to seduce a woman, he'd marry her. The first to set that condition was actress Sandra Knight. But she only lasted 5 years of marriage, quickly discovering that for Jack, marriage vows meant nothing. He had no sense of duty, no responsibility toward family. And yet, Sandra would tell everyone, he was always very sweet with me. It's just that Jack loved me, and he loved others too, without giving me any special preference. Helen Kallianiotis, a Greek dancer with magnificent almond-shaped black eyes, met Nicholson in one of Hollywood's night bars. She recalled that Jack was so tangled up in his marriage that Sandra had turned to religion. One day, she told her husband that she could not love both God and Jack at the same time. So she left him and took their daughter Jennifer with her. When word spread that Nicholson had been abandoned by his wife, his countless girlfriends rushed to his house to comfort the poor man. And comfort him they did. Though to reach the broken-hearted Jack, one often had to stand in a rather long line. Nicholson even asked Helen to stay, and she lived in his house for 3 years as a companion. During all that time, she claimed, Jack never once came near her bedroom. "I swear it's true," Helen insisted. "He just couldn't stand being alone in that empty house with his memories." Yes, Jack was tormented by guilt. He knew how cruel he had been to poor Sandra, especially on those nights when he came home blind drunk, or didn't come home at all. Anjelica Huston listened to all of this, but instead of scaring her off, the stories of Jack's unfaithfulness only fueled her desire. To tame such a madman, now that was a challenge worthy of a woman like her. Confident in her charm, she decided to make him suffer a little first. When Nicholson, in his usual smug manner, announced his decision that they should live together, she merely widened her eyes. Why? She didn't need his money. She had been surrounded by celebrities since childhood, and they certainly didn't seem like gods to her. To her, Jack was just a funny guy. Maybe the most fascinating one she had ever met, but nothing more. Yes, he always had a few killer jokes and hilarious faces ready, but still. Of course, Anjelica was bluffing. Like all the others, she was already hypnotized by his famous sideways glance, the hungry look of a wolf. After a bit of playful resistance, Miss Huston surrendered. Jack's new lover was one of the most stunning brunettes in Hollywood. From her late mother, Anjelica had inherited an expression of tragic doom that gave her beauty a mysterious, fateful air. She carried within her a secret that Nicholson could never unravel. At first, this made him treat Anjelica very differently from the way he treated other women. To everyone else, it seemed a miracle. Their home life looked like pure harmony. The only thing they disagreed on was colors. Jack loved wearing light suits, while Anjelica preferred black. But soon, troubling rumors reached John Huston's ears. Nicholson, it seemed, was back to his old ways, straying once again. Believing he could strengthen his daughter's marriage, Huston offered his wayward son-in-law the lead role in his new film, Prizzi's Honor. The old fox was certain that, once rewarded, Nicholson would feel indebted to both him and Anjelica for life. But that clever scheme turned out to be Huston's greatest mistake. Jack, once he realized what old John was up to, flew into a rage, though he wisely accepted the role anyway. Prizzi's Honor became one of the year's best films. Anjelica won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Nicholson received a Golden Globe. Soon after, Anjelica noted in her diary, "Things with Jack are improving." But Nicholson's passion for sudden nighttime disappearances and wild drinking binges eventually proved stronger than family ties. Jack also had a few secrets he guarded carefully from the press. One of them was the existence of his daughter Jennifer. At the time, Nicholson absolutely refused to let Hollywood know what a loving father he was. "It could damage my image," he admitted once to Life magazine. "In Hollywood, they often confuse tenderness with weakness. If people saw me waking up at night to change my daughter's diapers or pulling silly faces to make her laugh, half of the directors who hired me would have never considered me. They think of me as a maniac." Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, where Nicholson played a schizophrenic writer trying to kill his wife and son, was promoted in America as the scariest horror movie of all time. Many viewers really began to believe that Jack was just like his character in real life. Nicholson never denied it. He only smiled mysteriously. He knew that the more madness people saw in his image, the better. And in that sense, The Shining worked perfectly for him. 2.5 hours of male hysteria and psychosis. Shelley Duvall later recalled that when Jack had to chase her with an axe on set, she truly feared he might get carried away and actually hurt her. Before filming, she even begged Stanley Kubrick to swap the real axe for a fake one. The director reassured her. Jack was a normal guy, and he wouldn't cross the line. But during the take, Nicholson struck the door with such force that the handle flew off and hit a crew member in the head. After that, the real axe was immediately replaced with a prop. The incident leaked to the press. Journalists grilled every crew member, asking whether Jack had ever threatened them in any way. Nicholson, baring his teeth like a wolf, only chuckled, as if they'd ever tell you. In 1988, he was invited to play a true monster, the Joker in the first Batman film. They gave him a mask with a frozen half grin so frightening it unsettled even Jack himself. Right after filming, he swore he would never play villains again, but he broke that promise. After all, the role of the Joker alone boosted his fortune by nearly $60 million. And besides, many critics believed audiences no longer wanted to see Nicholson as a normal man. The 17 years he spent with Anjelica Huston were not the worst in his life, though Jack himself never commented on it. A few times he tried to slip away from her watchful eye. First to Meryl Streep, who openly considered Jack one of Hollywood's finest actors. At one film party, a small incident happened. Either Nicholson spilled his drink on Meryl's dress, or she splashed wine on his jacket. What mattered is that they quarreled, and they quarreled like people who had known each other well for a long time. Hollywood gossip hounds were shocked to discover that Jack had been seeing Meryl for quite a while. Meryl, who had the reputation of a saintly Samaritan, always helping children and the poor. Nicholson clearly fit neither category. Even Jack himself admitted, "With Meryl Streep, you can go years without seeing each other. But once you do, one look into her eyes, and the ocean that lives there washes away all traces of separation." Anjelica, who by then kept another list, Jack's lovers, decided not to bother writing down Meryl Streep's name, but she did add Rebecca Broussard. Somehow she sensed that this affair would end the family for good. In 1990, Jack was flying from Los Angeles to New York. His seatmate turned out to be a pretty young woman, Rebecca Broussard. The flight was long, 5 hours, with a bad weather forecast. Many passengers dozed off. Nicholson, too, nodded off, while Rebecca peacefully rested her head on his shoulder. 2 hours after takeoff, the plane was caught in a violent thunderstorm. It began shaking so hard that every passenger woke up. Even the crew began quietly reciting the Lord's Prayer. Jack Nicholson was no exception. Perhaps he was confessing his sins, regretting there was no longer time to change. And then, the tense silence was broken by Jack's pretty seatmate. Waking up, Rebecca had no idea what was going on. First, she burst out laughing, and then she started singing. Nicholson decided the poor girl had simply lost her mind from fear. When Rebecca finished her song, she suddenly, with complete seriousness, asked Jack's opinion about the latest NBA games. And just like that, the terror that had gripped him like an iron band began to fade. He pulled himself together, stopped clinging to her shoulder, and no longer whispered, "God, help me." When the plane landed, Jack Nicholson and Rebecca Broussard chose not to part. At first, they saw each other in secret. Watchful Anjelica found out about the affair, but she dismissed it. Jack's adventures were constant, and they had never led to anything serious before. But soon, a rumor swept through Hollywood. In their brand new home, only Anjelica would be moving in. Jack was already looking for a separate place of his own. For months, Nicholson had been telling her about the house. "It's wonderful, I'm thrilled." But each time he smiled with the sinister grin of the Joker. This was in 1990. Anjelica learned their marriage had finally sunk not from Jack himself, but from the morning papers. They reported that Jack Nicholson and Rebecca Broussard had welcomed a daughter, Lorraine. Anjelica had no children of her own. She quietly folded the newspaper, packed her things, left the house key for Jack, and walked away forever from the home where, for 17 years, she had known happiness. She moved in with her father. 2 years later, she learned that Nicholson had a second child, a son named Raymond, again with Rebecca Broussard. A week later came the news that Nicholson had left Rebecca and was living alone once more. Anjelica once again reached for her notebook. By writing down the names of Jack's new lovers, she remained invisibly close to him. One day, she admitted that keeping track of Nicholson's women had become a kind of hobby. She patiently waited for the moment when Jack would finally stop, so that she could return to his side. At last, her patience ran out. She decided to burn all her lists and start living her own life. But as we know, manuscripts don't burn. The lists found their way into the hands of reporters, who revealed everything to the public. By then, Anjelica no longer cared. She stopped keeping notes, stopped making lists. Anjelica Huston became, at last, a free woman. In the mid-1990s, Hollywood lit up with gossip. Rebecca Broussard was back with Jack, and once again they were living together as a family, still without the formality of marriage. Asked about the growing number of children connected to his name, Nicholson put it bluntly, "I'm a firm opponent of abortion. After all, I myself once came very close to being one. Luckily, my family was stronger than prejudice."